Hello, and welcome back to my channel. If you're watching for the first time, welcome. My name is Simbulele, and today is part 3 of my journey with love. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, please go back 2 videos and watch part 1 and part 2 of my journey with love. So in part 2, we ended off where I was on a date with this man and I was sitting across him, and I had a feeling that we were going to get married, and I wanted to expand a bit on that, like what had changed in my life, why was I confident that we were going to get married, what made me feel comfortable enough to open up my heart, to let this person in and pursue a relationship with him. Yeah, so I just want to talk a bit about that. So what made me confident that I wanted to pursue a relationship with this man and hopefully get married to him one day is that I had been praying about it. I had conversations with God about the type of relationship that I desired and the type of man that I wanted. I always say praying about the type of relationship that you want, type of marriage that you want, is like painting a picture with God. You spend time painting this picture, and what you basically have to do then is find the best fit, right? Someone could fit into the picture, maybe 30%, maybe 60%. The choice is yours to make if you want to settle for 80%, right? God gives you that choice. God does not predetermine who you will get married to, right? He leaves that to you, but praying about it helps eliminate any confusion. It makes it clearer to you the type of life that you want with or without marriage, right? And so what happens is that when you put these pictures against each other, hopefully they have their own picture, right? Their own goals, their own desires. And when you put these pictures against each other, there's more similarities than differences, that you don't have to compromise so much of yourself to fit into their picture, and they don't have to compromise so much of themselves to fit into your picture. Number 2, he actually checked all the boxes. You know, I had a list of all the characteristics that I wanted in a future husband. And when I sat down and I went through the list, he actually checked most of the boxes, right? Not everything. There were deal breakers, the non-negotiables, like, okay, those were fine, those were good. They're also nice to haves. I was like, okay, I can compromise on these ones. And yeah, there were a few, right? But let me tell you how God is so faithful that he will answer prayers that you forgot you prayed. So I was seeing this guy. He was sort of an entrepreneur, didn't really have an academic background, and he didn't really understand the career path that I had chosen. He'd complain about how I was always busy, never made enough time for him. He always had to beg. I was always working or at school, you know, and it was very frustrating for me as well. And I feel like, okay, this guy does not understand the career path that I have chosen. And I remember when things didn't work out, I remember praying and writing in my prayer journal that, Lord, okay, I don't want to say I don't want to marry an entrepreneur or whatever, but education to me is very important, and I want to marry someone with an academic background, even if they choose to be an entrepreneur later in life, but I want them to understand the career path that I have chosen. I remember writing in my prayer journal that education is very important to me, and I want the person I marry to at least have an honors degree, right? So I remember on our first date with my husband, he was driving me back home. We were just having a light conversation, you know, what are you busy with? What are you doing? And he mentioned that he was, you know, he had his businesses, he was working for this company, but they were also trying to acquire his own company. A lot of business things were too, and I was like, oh, okay, that's impressive. And then he mentions that he also just completed his honors degree. And I was like, oh wow, wonderful, right? Didn't really think about it until 2 days later when I was sitting and I was just reflecting on our date, and I remembered, okay, let me just go through my journal. And as I was reading my journal, I had written that I wanted someone with at least an honors degree. Doesn't matter if they're an entrepreneur or evangelist, but I wanted them to have like at least an honors degree. And I was just so shocked that God would remember that prayer that I had. And I was so reluctant. I remember I was so reluctant in writing that down. I was like, this is so stupid. It's never going to happen. But I actually wrote it down and God remembered. So yes, I think it's very important to have a clear picture of the type of man that you want, and so that you don't compromise on what's important to you. It doesn't matter how silly it seems to you. If it's important to you, it is important to God. Pray about it and God will fulfill your desires. Number 3, I had grown spiritually and I felt like I was ready to be in a relationship. During the 7 years I was single, I felt like I had really focused on building and pursuing a stronger relationship with God. I had gotten to a point where I knew who God was in my life. So even if a man came and offered me the stars and the moon, I knew who the sun was. I wouldn't make a God out of any relationship or out of marriage for that matter. I wouldn't idolize any man, because I knew who was first, who was last, and who was best in my life, in anything and in everything, and that was God for me. And also during those 7 years, God had loved me so well that he basically modeled the type of love that I should expect in a relationship, the type of love that I deserved, in the way that he cared for me and he provided for me, and the way I feel like he really took me seriously. He made me know and understand how much I mattered to him. And so I knew the type of love that I deserved. I knew God had modeled for me the type of love that I should expect in a relationship. And that's why I was like, okay, I know myself. So it's not just about the guy or the other person. It's also about me knowing what I want, knowing what I deserve, and knowing what God wants for me as well. I also felt like I was mentally and emotionally secure to be in a relationship. I had done the work, I had gone to therapy, not to be in a relationship, but really to heal from my past relationships, and also to deal with the effects of my parents' divorce, and all the traumas that I had experienced. And that really helped me to understand, not only understand the type of love that I deserve, but also how to communicate that to the next person. And it really helped our relationship, especially in the beginning, when my husband would maybe say something or do something, and I could recognize that the reaction was blown out of proportion, and I could also recognize what the triggers were, and I could communicate those. So that's why I think also emotional maturity is important in a relationship, so that you don't become an emotional burden to someone else. It's important to know what your triggers are. It's important to learn how to communicate your expectations, and it's also important to know how you want to be loved and communicate that. Number 5, I remember during one of our premarital counseling sessions, the pastor asked my husband, how do you know about Usumbulele is the one you want to marry? And he said that he felt like I was someone he could take home to meet his mom. And I felt like he was someone I could take home to meet my God. I was so proud to present him to God, like, look who I chose. Sometimes we think that whatever we want for ourselves, God wants the opposite of that. But it's not like that. I was confident that he was someone God would want for me too, and that's why I felt like I could pursue a relationship with him. And someone also once said that when it's from God, there is no confusion. And that's how I felt. I felt at peace. I didn't have to compromise on my beliefs and my values or my life goals. And that made me feel at peace. That made me confident that this person is someone God would want for me as well. And therefore, that made me confident to actually want to pursue a relationship with him then. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Basically, in summary, like how I knew I was ready, or how I knew he was the person I wanted to pursue a relationship with or hopefully marry, was that number one, I prayed about it. I think choosing who to marry is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make in your life. So it's not something you should take lightly. I think it's really important to pray about it and invite God and ask him to help you make the right decision. Number two, have a clear picture of what you want, the characteristics that you want. And I think it's really helpful to write all these things down. No matter how silly it seems, it's important to God. If it's important to you, it's important to God. Number three, spiritual growth. It's really important to know who God is. And that way you don't expect that man to be God. You know who God is. Number four, it's important to know yourself. It's important to know why you are the person you are. It's important to heal from your past and to be able to recognize your triggers and communicate your expectations. Number five, I was really at peace. There was no confusion. I didn't have to compromise on my faith, my values, my life goals, my beliefs. And I felt like he was someone that God wanted for me. That's the summary of it all, and I hope you learned a thing or two from the story. And please leave your comments down below. Thank you so much for following, and thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.